The moment Megan Anthony's eyes locked onto the code scrolling across Ha-Joon Kim's screen, three things became clear. She understood it, she shouldn't have looked, and her life would never be the same. It was 11 p.m. in his Philadelphia mansion. Amber light pooled across mahogany and leather, casting shadows that seemed to breathe. Megan had been cleaning this place for 6 months, moving through rooms like a ghost in a black uniform, polishing glass, dusting shelves, existing in that invisible space reserved for people who serve. But tonight, something pulled her toward his desk. The screen. Lines of code cascading like digital rain, each string pulsing with an intelligence that made her breath catch. She knew what she was looking at. Her MIT dropout brain, the one she'd buried under student debt, and her mother's medical bills, recognized it instantly. Polymorphic encryption. Military-grade architecture. It's not spreading yet, she added slowly. The code's already embedded in hospital networks, but dormant. It needs a biometric trigger to activate. Whoever wrote this made someone's heartbeat the kill switch. Lethal intent wrapped in elegant syntax. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, reading without touching, her mind already mapping the structure. Then she felt him. The air shifted. Cedar and gunpowder, sharp and dark. Heat radiated behind her, close enough that she could sense the controlled power in his stillness. You read code, not a question. A statement delivered in a voice like silk wrapped around a blade, each syllable carrying the weight of his Korean accent. Megan's heart slammed against her ribs. She turned slowly. Ha-Joon Kim stood less than a foot away. Tall, devastatingly composed in a black suit that probably cost more than her mother's hospital bills. His dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare, dissected, seen in ways that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She should have looked away. Should have apologized, backed down, played the role of the frightened maid. Instead, she stared at the screen behind him. It's a polymorphic virus, she heard herself whisper. Whoever wrote this wants to kill people. Thousands of them. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? His jaw tightened, and then his hand moved. Not violent but deliberate, closing around her wrist. The touch burned. I have 48 hours, Ha-Joon said, his grip firm, claiming, to decrypt that code or my empire burns. My enemies will launch it and frame me for mass murder. For months, I thought the coder behind this virus was a ghost, he said. Then one of my men traced the architecture to a forgotten thesis on cryptographic warfare, written by a student named Megan Anthony. Her pulse stuttered. You found me through my research? I found you because I was hunting your father. I didn't realize the connection until after I'd already bought your mother's debt. When I learned who you were, I made sure you'd end up here. He stepped closer, backing her against the desk, caging her with his presence. Can you break it? Megan's pulse thundered in her ears. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp features carved from stone and shadow. Lips that promised things she'd only imagined in the dark privacy of her thoughts, and eyes that saw straight through every defense she'd ever built. I don't know, she managed. Wrong answer. He spun her chair, positioning her in front of the screen, his hands bracketing her on either side of the keyboard. She could feel his breath against her neck, controlled and dangerous. Let me rephrase, he murmured, voice dropping to something intimate and terrifying. You will break it, and until you do, every breath you take, every thought in that brilliant mind, every single second of your existence belongs to me. His thumb found her pulse point, pressing gently against the frantic rhythm. Do we have an understanding, Megan Anthony? Her name on his lips sent electricity down her spine. He knew her name. He'd always known her name. What if I refuse? The question came out shakier than she intended. But she forced herself to meet his gaze in the reflection of the darkened screen. Ha-Joon's smile was slow, beautiful, devastating. Then I make a phone call, and your mother's ventilator stops working. His tone remained conversational, almost gentle. I watch you break. Then I kill you. But not before I make you understand exactly what you threw away. He leaned in, lips brushing the shell of her ear. Or maybe I'll make you beg me to keep you anyway. Megan's breath caught. Fear and something darker, something she didn't want to name, coiled tight in her stomach. She should be screaming, fighting, running, but her body had gone still, hyper-aware of every point where his presence pressed into her space, every nerve ending alive with terrible anticipation. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I know you will, precious girl." He released her then, stepping back with the casual grace of a man who'd never doubted the outcome. He adjusted his cufflinks, composed and lethal, as if he hadn't just threatened murder and seduction in the same breath. 48 hours. You work here, sleep here, eat when I tell you, my men will watch you. And they'll teach you basic defense, he added almost casually. If you're smart enough to decrypt warfare code, you should know how to survive a real one. She hadn't believed him then. Later she'd be glad she listened. He paused at the door, turning back with that devastating smile. "And Megan? Don't even think about running." His eyes held hers, dark and absolute. "I always catch what's mine." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Megan stared at the screen, at the code that had just changed everything. Her hands trembled as she reached for the keyboard. Outside the study, she could hear footsteps. Guards taking position. Watchers making sure she stayed exactly where Ha-Jun wanted her. She'd walked into this mansion 6 months ago as a maid drowning in debt, invisible and desperate. Now she sat in a devil's chair, surrounded by his amber light and leather-bound danger, her brilliant mind the only thing standing between salvation and destruction. And the worst part, the part that made shame burn hot in her chest, part of her wanted to see what would happen if she stayed. Part of her wanted him to collect. Welcome back, my daring hearts and dangerous minds. Tonight's story isn't about good or evil. It's about the space in between, where love wears a gun and loyalty tastes like blood. Before we begin, hit subscribe, tap like, and tell me where you're tuning in from. Every whisper, every view, every act of support keeps these forbidden worlds alive. Now, let's descend together into the Mansion of Secrets, where a black maid meets a Korean king of crime, and neither will leave unchanged. They moved her at dawn. Megan hadn't slept. It was hard to believe that only 30 hours had passed since she'd agreed to decrypt the code. Inside Ha-Jun's penthouse, time didn't move like it did in the real world. It looped, folded, devoured itself until day and night blurred into the same relentless pressure. How could she, with the weight of 48 hours pressing against her chest like a stone? She'd spent the night staring at the code, her mind racing through encryption patterns while her body remained hyper-aware of the guard stationed outside the study door. When Ha-Jun's right-hand man appeared, she nearly jumped from the chair. "Come," he said simply. Jae-min-seok was shorter than Ha-Jun but built like violence compressed into a suit. His face held no expression, no mercy, just cold efficiency. The scar running from his left eyebrow to his jawline told stories he'd never speak aloud. He gestured toward the door, and Megan stood on trembling legs. "Where are we going?" "You work upstairs now. Boss's orders." They rode the private elevator in silence, the kind that made her skin prickle with awareness. Jay stood with his hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward, but she felt studied anyway, assessed, catalogued. She noticed the bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket, the way his stance never fully relaxed, the micro-adjustments he made to keep her in his peripheral vision at all times. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Megan stepped out and forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped the entire space, revealing Philadelphia's skyline painted in morning gold. Marble stretched beneath her feet, veined with bronze that caught the light like frozen rivers. The furniture looked sculptural, minimalist, and expensive in that way that whispered old money and new power. Everything gleamed: glass, chrome, the grand piano in the corner that probably never got played. Abstract art she recognized from museum catalogs hung on the walls. A Rothko, a Basquiat, pieces worth millions displayed like casual decoration. It was the most beautiful prison she'd ever seen. "Your room." Jay pointed down a hallway. She found herself in a suite that could have housed 3 families. King bed dressed in charcoal silk, bathroom with a soaking tub carved from black stone. A closet already filled with clothes in her size, tags still attached, each piece carefully selected. Designer labels she'd only seen in magazines. Stella McCartney, Prada, The Row. Every garment in dark colors that would suit her skin tone perfectly. He'd been planning this. Studying her. Knowing her measurements, her preferences, her style. "Workstation is through there." Jay indicated another door. Kitchen access at the end of the hall. You don't leave this floor without permission. What if there's a fire? His expression didn't change. Then you burn. He left her standing there, and she heard the soft electronic beep of a lock engaging. She tried the door handle. Solid. Immovable. Biometric security. Of course. Megan walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city moved with oblivious freedom. Cars, people, lives that didn't belong to Korean mafia bosses who spoke in threats and touched like they owned your pulse. Her reflection stared back, dark skin stark against the morning light. She looked small here, swallowed by luxury that felt like quicksand. But she didn't look away. Instead, she studied herself, searching for signs of the woman she'd been yesterday versus the woman she was becoming. The workstation turned out to be a tech-wet dream. 3 curved monitors arranged in perfect ergonomic alignment, custom mechanical keyboard with Cherry MX switches, the expensive kind she'd dreamed about. Processing power that made her old laptop look like a calculator. Dual GPUs, 64 gigabytes of RAM. Ha-jun had built her a command center worthy of NSA-level operations. She should have been grateful. Instead, she felt the cage tighten. The code waited on the main screen, exactly where she'd left it. Megan settled into the leather chair, its butter-soft surface molding to her body, and forced her mind to focus. Polymorphic encryption, self-modifying. Every time the virus executed, it rewrote its own structure to avoid detection. Brilliant and horrifying. Her fingers found the keyboard. Within an hour, she'd isolated the first layer. The encryption used a rotating cipher that changed every 64 iterations, but the rotation pattern followed a mathematical sequence. Fibonacci, modified. Whoever wrote this had training, sophistication, ego. She started building the decryption algorithm, losing herself in the pure logic of it. Code didn't lie. Code didn't threaten your mother. Code was just truth written in syntax. But even as she worked, part of her mind kept circling back to Ha-jun's words. Every breath you take belongs to me. She hated that the thought made her shiver. 3 hours later, she'd cracked the outer shell. The monitors flickered, and new information flooded the screens. Not just code now, but architecture. Network maps, target systems, and there, buried in the metadata, a digital signature so subtle most people would have missed it. But Megan saw it. Her hands froze over the keyboard. The coding style, the variable naming conventions, the specific way comments were formatted, abbreviated Latin phrases her father used to mutter while working. Tempus fugit. Ars longa, vita brevis. Impressive. She spun the chair around. Ha-jun stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The morning light caught the angles of his face, softening nothing. She noticed details she'd missed last night. The thin scar along his left collarbone visible through his unbuttoned collar, the expensive watch on his wrist, Patek Philippe, probably worth more than her entire education, the way he held himself with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. How long have you been watching? Long enough. He moved into the room, and she felt her body respond against her will, every nerve ending suddenly alert. You broke the first encryption faster than my team predicted. Your team? I have the best hackers money can buy. Lee Sungmin handles infrastructure penetration. Park Ji-woo specializes in financial systems. Chen Weilong focuses on competitor intelligence. He stopped behind her chair, looking at the screens over her shoulder. None of them could do what you just did. His proximity overwhelmed her senses. That scent again, cedar and gunpowder, mixed now with something warmer. Coffee. He'd been awake as long as she had. The outer layer was simple pattern recognition, she managed, keeping her voice steady. The real work starts now. Tell me what you found. Megan pointed to the network map. This virus is designed to infiltrate hospital systems across the eastern seaboard. Once inside, it targets life support protocols, ventilators, dialysis machines, anything keeping critical patients alive. Ha-jun's jaw tightened, the only sign of emotion. It's not about money, she continued. Whoever launches this wants mass casualties. They want you framed for domestic terrorism. The signature in the code is too obvious. Like they want you to know who built it. Kevin. The name came out like a curse. My half-brother has always preferred spectacle to efficiency. He built his territory on fear and theater while I built mine on calculation. His hand moved, reaching past her to point at something on the screen, and his arm brushed her shoulder. The touch was incidental, meaningless, but it sent heat cascading down her spine. She shifted away, her body instinctively creating distance even as part of her wanted to lean closer. I need more time to decode the activation sequence. You'll have it. But he didn't move, didn't step back. When did you eat last? I'm not hungry. That wasn't the question. Megan turned to face him, and the movement brought them too close. She could see the fine grain of stubble along his jaw, the exact shade of brown in his eyes, nearly black in the dim light of the workstation. Up close, she noticed the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. He was older than she'd first thought. Mid-30s maybe, old enough to have built an empire, old enough to have killed those 17 men he'd mentioned. Why do you care if I eat? Hajun tilted his head slightly, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Because you're valuable. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, aren't you? His smile was slow, dangerous. Tell me, Megan, who holds your mother's life in their hands? Who controls whether you leave this room? Who decides if you eat, sleep, breathe free air? If that's not ownership, what is? The words should have made her angry. Instead, they settled over her like truth she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Before she could respond, he straightened and walked to the door. Jay will bring food in 20 minutes. Eat it. Your mind is brilliant, Megan, but brilliance needs fuel. He paused at the threshold. Oh, and clever girl, the glass wall between your workstation and my office? It's one way. I've been watching you work since dawn, watching you bite your lip when you concentrate, watching you lean forward when you find something interesting, watching the way your eyes light up when you solve a problem. Her breath caught. I see everything you do, he said softly, and I'm fascinated. The door closed behind him, and Megan sat frozen in the chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned slowly to look at the glass wall she'd assumed was just architectural design. From this side, it showed only her reflection, a woman with wide eyes and parted lips, looking more shaken than she wanted to admit. But from his office, he'd been studying her for hours, watching her work, observing every unconscious gesture. The violation should have made her furious. Instead, something dark and unwanted coiled low in her belly, an awareness that she was being seen in ways she'd never been seen before. Not as invisible help, not as desperate daughter, but as something he wanted to watch, to study, to understand. She looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. Who was this woman who felt thrilled by being observed? Jay arrived exactly 20 minutes later with a tray. Grilled salmon, quinoa salad, fresh fruit arranged like art. The kind of meal that required thought and care, not just sustenance. She noticed the details. The salmon was prepared Korean style with gochugaru. The fruit included Asian pear slices, everything chosen with knowledge of her preferences she'd never shared. How long had Hajun been watching her? Eat, Jay said, setting it down. Boss's orders. Then he added, quieter, almost kind. Don't test his patience. You won't like what happens when it runs out. Megan looked at the food, at the screens glowing with lethal code, at the luxury surrounding her like velvet-lined shackles. She picked up the fork. The first bite of salmon melted on her tongue, perfectly seasoned. She chewed slowly, tasting everything. The heat of the chili, the sweetness of the glaze, the care that went into preparation, and hated herself for how easily she obeyed. But she also noticed something else. She was hungry. Starving, actually. When had she last eaten properly? Yesterday morning? The day before? As she ate, she caught herself glancing at the one-way glass, wondering if Hajun was watching her now, wondering what he saw, wondering why that thought made her pulse quicken instead of her skin crawl. This is Stockholm Syndrome, she told herself firmly. You're traumatized, scared, your body is confused. But the rationalization felt hollow. Because if this was trauma, why did her mind keep returning to the moment his hand had closed around her wrist? Why could she still feel the heat of his breath against her neck? Why did she want him to come back? She finished the meal in silence, then returned to the code with renewed focus. If she couldn't control her thoughts, at least she could control this. The encryption patterns beckoned, and she dove in deep, desperate for the clarity that code provided. Behind the one-way glass, Hajun watched her work and smiled. 26 hours remained when Megan found her father's ghost. She'd been working through the night again, peeling back layers of encryption like surgical dissection. Hajun had visited twice, bringing coffee she didn't ask for, standing in silence while she worked, his presence both distraction and strange comfort. Now, at 3 a.m, she stared at something that made no sense. A subroutine buried in the virus's core structure. The syntax was familiar in a way that made her skin prickle, each line written with specific quirks that were unique as fingerprints. Double spacing after conditional statements. Variable names using Greek letters. Comments written in abbreviated Latin. Tempus fugit, time flies. Ars longa, vita brevis. Art is long, life is short. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, patient and warm, teaching her to code on that ancient desktop. Always comment your code, Meggie. Future you will thank present you. Her hands started shaking. She pulled up the metadata, tracing the code's origin through proxies and false endpoints, following digital breadcrumbs that most people would never see. But her father had taught her to look for ghosts in machines. He'd shown her how programmers left traces of themselves in their work, patterns as unique as handwriting. The trail led to a server farm in Virginia, NSA adjacent. Black budget operations. Her father was alive, and he'd built the weapon that Hajun needed her to defuse. Megan pushed back from the desk, her chest tight, her breath coming shallow. The room tilted, and she gripped the chair arms to steady herself. 12 years of wondering if he was dead, if he'd been murdered, if she'd somehow failed him by not being enough to make him stay. And all along he'd been alive, working, building weapons, choosing to stay gone. You found something. She jerked her head up. Hajun stood in the doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked exhausted and alert in equal measure. Dark circles under his eyes that spoke of nights spent managing an empire. My father wrote this, she whispered. Marcus Anthony. Every subroutine, every encryption layer. This is his work. Hajun didn't look surprised. He walked into the room, and something in his expression, that careful neutrality, made understanding crash over her like ice water. You knew. Her voice shook. You knew he wrote it. Yes. For how long? 3 weeks. Since Kevin sent me the first threat. Hajun stopped a few feet away, giving her space she didn't want. Your father has been working for my brother for 6 months. Lee Sung-min tracked his digital signature 2 days after we received the code. Megan stood, her legs unsteady. And you still brought me here? Still made me decode his work? Yes. The single word felt like a slap. You used me. Her hands clenched into fists. You knew this whole time that decoding this would lead me back to him, and you used me anyway. Hajun's expression hardened. No, Megan. I found you. What's the difference? He moved closer, and she backed up until the desk hit her spine. But he didn't stop, didn't give her distance, just crowded into her space with that overwhelming presence. She could smell his cologne, see the pulse point at his throat, feel the heat radiating from his body. The difference, he said quietly, is that using you would mean I saw you as a tool. Finding you means I saw you as the answer. That's the same thing. It's not. His hand rose and she flinched, but he only pointed at the screen behind her. Kevin has been planning this for over a year. He hired your father specifically because Marcus Anthony is brilliant. And because he knew that if I ever found out, if I ever needed someone to break his code, there was only one person in the world who could do it. His daughter. His daughter. Ha. June's voice softened fractionally. Kevin wanted me to find you. Wanted me to bring you into this. Because either you decrypt the virus and save me, which means working against your own father, or you refuse, and thousands die while I take the blame. Megan's mind raced, fitting pieces together. It's a trap. Both ways I lose. Both ways you were supposed to break. Hajun's hand moved again, this time settling on the desk beside her hip, caging her without touching. But you're not breaking, are you, clever girl? You're solving it anyway. Because you threatened my mother. Yes. At least he didn't lie about it. But there was something else in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like regret? Admiration? She couldn't read him, and that made her feel more unsteady. "Where is he?" Her voice cracked. "Where's my father now?" "Kevin keeps him in a private facility outside Philadelphia. Protected, controlled. Your father builds weapons, and my brother provides everything he needs to forget why he's building them." "Money?" "Absolution." Ha-Jun's eyes held hers. "Your father has been running from his past for 12 years. Kevin offered him a way to disappear completely. New identity. Unlimited resources. All he had to do was create something that would destroy me. And he did it." Bitterness flooded her throat. "He chose to build this instead of coming home. People make choices based on what they can live with. Your father couldn't live with being Marcus Anthony anymore, so he became someone else. A monster. Like me?" Ha-Jun's lips curved without humor. "Yes, like me." But she heard something in his voice. A self-awareness that surprised her. He knew what he was. He didn't pretend otherwise. Megan stared at him, at this man who dragged her into darkness and forced her to confront truths she'd buried. Her father was alive. Her father had abandoned her by choice. Her father had built a weapon meant to kill thousands. And Ha-Jun had known all of it. "I should hate you," she whispered. "You should." He leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek. "But you don't. Not entirely. Because hating me would be simple. And nothing about this is simple anymore." His hand lifted, hovering near her face, asking permission without words. She should pull away, should slap him, scream, demand he take her home. Instead, she stayed frozen as his fingers brushed the curve of her jaw. Featherlight, testing. But then something in her shifted. A resistance she hadn't known she was holding on to. She jerked back, putting space between them. "No." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You don't get to comfort me. You don't get to touch me like I'm something precious when you orchestrated all of this." Ha-Jun's hand lowered slowly, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Disappointment? Respect? "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't get to comfort you. But Megan, I need you to understand something." "What?" "Your father didn't just abandon you. He abandoned himself. The man you remember, the one who taught you to code, who called you Meggie and made you hot chocolate while you debugged programs. He couldn't live with what the NSA made him do. The black ops he was part of. The people who died from weapons he designed." Megan's breath caught. She'd never known the details of her father's work. Just that he'd left, and everything had fallen apart. "Kevin offered him oblivion," Ha-Jun continued. "A chance to never remember. Never face it. Just build and forget. Build and forget. Your father is a coward, Megan. But he's not heartless, he's just broken. That doesn't make it better. No." Ha-Jun stepped back finally, giving her the space she'd demanded. "But it makes it true." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the penthouse's perfect temperature control. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what you're fighting. Not just the code, not just Kevin, but the ghost of who your father used to be." His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. "And because when we face him, and we will face him, I need you to be ready. Ready to choose." "Choose what?" "Revenge or mercy, rage or understanding." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Both are valid, both are yours to take. But you need to decide before that moment comes, or it will decide for you." He left her standing there, shaking with emotions she couldn't name. Megan looked at the code on the screen. Her father's work, elegant and deadly. Then she looked at her hands, at the fingers that had been trained by those same hands to see patterns, to think in logic, to build things that mattered. She'd thought finding her father would give her answers. Instead, it only gave her more questions, and 26 hours to solve them all. She returned to her chair slowly, her mind spinning. But this time, when she started typing, she wasn't just decrypting code. She was preparing for a choice she didn't want to make. Hours passed. The sun rose outside the windows, painting Philadelphia in shades of gold and rose. Megan worked in silence, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her mind dissecting her father's architecture piece by piece. And she noticed something. The deeper she went, the more she saw him in the code. Little details. Private jokes embedded in comments that only she would recognize. Variables named after books he'd read to her as a child. Meg, variable, appeared 3 times in critical functions. He'd known she would find this. He'd known she would be the one to break it. He'd left her breadcrumbs. But to what? Reconciliation? Warning? Apology? She couldn't tell. At 8 a.m., Ha-jun returned with breakfast. This time he didn't speak. Just set down a tray with Korean breakfast foods. Rice, kimchi jjigae, grilled mackerel, and turned to leave. Wait, Megan heard herself say. He stopped, looking back. The code, she said slowly. My father left traces. Messages, maybe? Things only I would see. Ha-jun's expression sharpened. What kind of messages? I don't know yet, but they're there. She met his eyes. He knew I would be the one to find this. He prepared for it. That changes things. How? It means he's not just a coward. Ha-jun's voice went cold. It means he's playing both sides. Kevin thinks he has your father's loyalty, but Marcus is hedging his bets. You think he wants me to find him? I think he wants you to save him. Ha-jun's smile was sharp, dangerous, and that, clever girl, is a weakness we can exploit. Megan stared at him, at the calculation in his eyes, and felt something in her chest go tight. Her father was alive but broken. Ha-jun was dangerous but honest, and she was caught between them, holding the key to everyone's survival. Eat, Ha-jun said softly, his voice gentler now. Then rest. You'll need your strength for what comes next. This time, she didn't argue. She ate in silence, tasting nothing, her mind already 3 moves ahead. And when Ha-jun returned an hour later, settling into the chair beside her to work on his own laptop, she didn't tell him to leave. Because maybe, just maybe, being seen by a monster wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Maybe it was the only thing keeping her sane. Ha-jun started testing her on the second day. Small things at first. He'd enter her workstation while she was deep in code, stand close enough that she felt his presence like static electricity, and wait, watching. Silent. She'd force herself to keep typing, to ignore the way her body responded to his proximity, the way her skin prickled with awareness when he shifted his weight or breathed. He never touched her. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, he invaded her space with nothing but presence, testing how long she could pretend he wasn't there. She usually lasted 4 minutes before her concentration shattered. But today, she was determined to last longer. The code sprawled across her screens. Polymorphic layers within layers, her father's architecture revealing itself in fractal complexity. She was close to something. She could feel it. A pattern emerging from the chaos. Ha-jun entered at minute 2. She kept typing, her jaw set, refusing to acknowledge him. He moved to stand directly behind her chair. Still, she typed. His hand settled on the back of her chair, close enough that she could feel the heat of it near her shoulder but not touching. Her fingers stuttered on the keyboard. You're aware of me, he observed, voice low. I'm trying to work. And failing. Your error rate increased the moment I walked in. She could hear the smile in his voice. Line 37. You wrote VOD instead of void. Line 41. Missing semicolon. Line 43. I get it. She spun the chair around, forcing him to step back. You're distracting me. Intentionally. Why? Ha-jun crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, and the movement was predatory grace. Because I want to see how long before you stop pretending. Pretending what? That you're unaffected. His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. That you don't think about me. That you haven't noticed the way I watch you. I noticed. It's creepy. Is it? He tilted his head. Then why haven't you asked me to stop? Because she didn't want him to. The admission burned in her throat, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she said, because I can't make you do anything. You own this cage. Ah. Ha-jun's smile turned knowing. But you can ask, and I would listen. I've listened to everything you've said, haven't I? When you asked for more time, I gave it. When you needed space, I provided it. When you demanded to know about your father, I told you the truth. He had. She couldn't deny that. So ask me, he continued softly. Ask me to leave you alone. Ask me to stop watching you work. Ask me to stop bringing you food you didn't request, prepared the way you like it. Ask me to stop caring if you're sleeping, eating, taking care of yourself. Megan opened her mouth, then closed it, because she realized with growing horror that she didn't want to ask. She wanted him to keep watching, keep caring, keep seeing her as something more than invisible help. The realization made her feel sick. I can't, she whispered. Can't or won't. Both. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. I don't know what's real anymore. Is this Stockholm Syndrome? Trauma bonding? Am I just so desperate for someone to see me that I'm confusing coercion with care? Hajun was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, and she thought he'd leave. Instead, he pulled the second chair closer and sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Let me tell you what's real, he said, his voice stripped of its usual command. 3 years ago, I found your post on a cryptography forum. You'd solved a problem that had stumped professional security experts for months. Your solution was elegant, innovative, and you posted it anonymously with no expectation of recognition, just sharing brilliance because you could. He paused, and she found herself looking at him despite herself. I tracked you down, watched you work 3 jobs while taking care of your mother, watched you solve coding problems on library computers because you couldn't afford your own equipment, watched you dim your light because the world told you to be grateful for scraps. That's stalking. Yes. He didn't deny it. But it's also the moment I realized I'd spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Power, money, protection. And none of them saw me either. I was just a resource, just like you were just invisible. Megan's breath caught at the vulnerability in his voice. So I made a choice, Hajun continued. A terrible, selfish, manipulative choice. I brought you into my world not just because I needed you, but because I wanted to see what would happen if someone like you was finally given everything you deserved. Resources, challenge, recognition. You can't force recognition on someone. No, but I could create the circumstances where you'd have no choice but to show the world who you really are. His eyes met hers. And I was right, wasn't I? Look at what you've done in 30 hours. You're breaking encryption that defeated my entire team. You're outthinking your father. You're becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. At what cost? Her voice shook. My freedom? My sanity? My ability to trust my own feelings? Yes. He didn't soften it. The cost is steep, and I made that choice for you, which was wrong. But Megan, would you have chosen this yourself? Would you have ever believed you deserved more than survival? The question hit like a physical blow because the answer was no. She would have kept drowning, kept sacrificing, kept making herself small until there was nothing left. That doesn't make what you did right. I know. Hajun's voice was quiet. But it makes it true. And now you have to decide. Do you hate me for giving you no choice? Or do you thank me for forcing you to choose yourself? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. He stood, giving her space again. But it's honest. I'm obsessed with you, Megan. I've been obsessed since that first forum post. And yes, I've done terrible things to bring you here. But I've also done something no one else in your life has ever done. What? I've made you essential. He walked to the door, then looked back. And once you feel essential, you can never go back to invisible. That's the real trap. Not the threats. Not the locked doors. But knowing what it feels like to matter. He left her with that truth hanging in the air. Megan sat in silence for a long time. Her hands shaking, her mind spinning. He was right. She hated that he was right. For 30 hours, she'd been the most important person in this building. Her mind mattered. Her choices mattered. She mattered. And the thought of going back to cleaning floors and being unseen felt like suffocation. She returned to the code with trembling fingers, but her heart wasn't in it. Instead, she found herself thinking about Hajun's words, about obsession and recognition, about the terrible, selfish choice he'd made, about the fact that she hadn't asked him to stop. Hours passed. Evening fell over Philadelphia. She worked mechanically, making progress but feeling distant from it all. Then he returned. Not with food or coffee, but with a small box wrapped in black paper. "What is this?" she asked warily. "Open it." Inside, she found a fountain pen. Vintage. Beautiful. The kind of instrument that made writing feel important. My father gave me this when I was 12, Hajun said quietly. The day he told me I would inherit his empire. He said, "Power is nothing without the ability to write your own story." Megan stared at the pen, at this piece of his history offered without explanation. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're writing a new story now. One where you're not defined by debt or duty or other people's expectations." He met her eyes. "And I want you to have something that matters to me, so you know this isn't just about using you, it's about seeing you." She picked up the pen carefully, feeling the weight of it. The silver was worn smooth in places where his fingers had gripped it. There were tiny engravings in Korean characters along the barrel. "What does this say?" "Those who carry dragons must learn to breathe fire." Hajun's smile was slight. "My father believed in dragons, in monsters who chose to be more than their nature allowed. And you?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Do you believe in dragons?" "I believe in you." He said it simply, without performance, which is more terrifying than believing in dragons. Something in Megan's chest cracked at the honesty in his voice. She wanted to throw the pen back at him. Wanted to scream that gifts didn't erase manipulation, that pretty words didn't change the cage, but she also wanted to keep it. Keep this piece of him. Keep this evidence that he saw her as more than a tool. "I don't forgive you," she said finally. "I know. And I don't trust you. I know that too. But I also don't want to be invisible anymore." The admission felt like exposing a wound. "And I hate that you're the one who made me see that." Hajun's expression softened into something that looked almost like pain. "Then hate me. But don't go back to being unseen. Promise me that at least." "Why does my promise matter to you?" "Because in 3 years of watching you, I never saw you make a promise you didn't keep." He moved closer, and this time she didn't retreat. "You're loyal to everyone except yourself. Your mother, your father's memory, even your employers who barely knew your name. But Megan, be loyal to your own potential. Just this once. And if that means leaving you when this is over, then leave." His voice went rough. "But leave as someone who knows her worth. Leave as someone who will never settle for invisible again. That's all I want. For you to be free even if that freedom takes you away from me." The vulnerability in his words made her chest tight. This man who commanded empires, who killed without hesitation, who manipulated her into his world, he was asking for nothing, just offering her permission to become. It was the kindest cruelty anyone had ever shown her. "I need to work," she said, her voice unsteady. "I know." He stepped back. "But Megan, keep the pen. Even if you throw everything else away, keep that. Because it's the first thing anyone's given you that says you deserve beautiful things." He left before she could respond. Megan sat holding the pen, feeling the weight of silver and history and impossible choices. Then she set it carefully beside her keyboard and returned to the code. But throughout the night she found her eyes drifting to it. This beautiful, terrible gift that meant more than it should. And when she finally cracked the next encryption layer at 3 a.m., she used that pen to take notes on paper. The old-fashioned way, the way her father had taught her. The ink flowed smooth as silk, and every word felt important. Maybe that was the real trap. Not the locked doors or the threats, but learning that she deserved beautiful things, and wanting more. The truth arrived at hour 36, delivered in a manila folder that Jay set on her desk without ceremony. Megan was deep in the virus's final encryption layer, her mind splintered across 3 monitors when the folder's presence finally registered. She glanced at Jay. "What is this?" "Boss said you'd want to see it." His expression was neutral, but something in his eyes looked almost sympathetic. "He told me to tell you. No more secrets, even the ones that hurt." Her stomach tightened. Nothing Hajun gave her was ever simple. Inside the folder, financial records. Her mother's hospital bills dating back 14 months, each one stamped with the same acquisition notice. Debt purchased by Elysian Holdings, a shell company. She traced the ownership through 3 layers of corporate structure until she found the name at the top. Hajun Kim. The dates made her chest constrict. He'd bought her mother's debt 4 months before Megan had applied for the maid position. 4 months before she'd ever walked through his mansion's doors. Her hands started shaking. Beneath the financial records, surveillance photos. Her leaving her apartment. Her at the hospital holding her mother's hand. Her at the library hunched over a laptop, working on code she couldn't afford to run on better equipment. Her standing outside that bakery window, staring at cakes she'd never buy. Photo after photo, time-stamped over 18 months. He'd been watching her long before he'd ever spoken her name. But it was the third section that made her stop breathing. Employment records. The maid position at his mansion, created specifically for her. Requirements that matched her exact qualifications. Technology background, security clearance from her MIT days, experience with discretion. She'd worked for 3 wealthy families before this. The job posting had never been real. It had been bait. But beneath that, something else. Records of other candidates Hajun had interviewed and rejected. Women with better references, more experience, perfect backgrounds. He'd rejected them all. Because they weren't her. And at the bottom of the folder, handwritten notes in Korean. She couldn't read them, but she recognized Hajun's handwriting from the memos she'd seen on his desk. She photographed the page with her phone and ran it through translation software. Subject demonstrates exceptional resilience. Works 16-hour days without complaint. Prioritizes mother's care over own welfare. Coding ability vastly exceeds current employment. MIT dropout due to financial hardship, not academic failure. GPA 3.97 at time of departure. Recommendation: accelerate debt acquisition timeline. Create employment opportunity that provides financial stability while allowing continued surveillance. Subject must not suspect manipulation. Pride would trigger rejection. Note: Chen Wei. Long suggests more aggressive approach. Rejected. Subject responds to perceived autonomy, not force. Must believe choice is hers. Week 34. Subject stopped at bakery window again. Same behavior. Stares. Does not enter. Recommend small luxury offerings once employment secured to establish reward pattern. The clinical dissection of her life, her patterns, her psychology, laid out in neat handwritten observations. Megan stood, the folder falling from numb fingers. Papers scattered across the marble like evidence of a crime she'd been too blind to see. She walked straight to Hajun's office without knocking. He looked up from his desk, unsurprised. He'd been expecting this. "You've been stalking me." Her voice came out steady despite the rage trembling through her limbs. "For over a year. You bought my mother's debt, created a fake job, manipulated me into your house. You studied me like I was an experiment." Hajun set down his pen with careful precision. "Yes. Just yes. No apologies. No excuses. You orchestrated everything. My entire employment. My servitude. You owned me before I ever walked through your door. I didn't know who you were when I bought the debt," he said quietly. "But once I did, I couldn't stop. I wanted to see if the woman behind that code was as brilliant and as dangerous as her father. I gave you opportunity," he corrected, standing. "I gave you access to your mother's care. I gave you a chance to be seen. By stalking me? By cataloging my behavior like I was some kind of lab rat?" She moved closer, her hands clenched into fists. "You had someone analyze my psychology. You ran surveillance for 18 months. You manipulated every single aspect of bringing me here." "Yes." He moved around the desk, and she backed toward the door. "Because watching you struggle was unbearable, and you were too proud to accept help any other way. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone had to." His control finally cracked, emotion bleeding through. "You were drowning, Megan. Working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating 1 meal a day. I watched you collapse in that hospital corridor and get back up like nothing happened. Watched you code solutions to problems that companies would have paid millions for, then delete them because you had no way to monetize your brilliance without capital you'd never have. That was my life, my choice. Your death." He moved closer, and she held her ground this time. "You would have worked yourself into the ground within a year. Heart attack. Stress-induced stroke. Malnutrition. I ran the probabilities, Megan. I had Chen Weilong build predictive models based on your health patterns, work schedule, financial trajectory. You had 18 months before complete collapse. Maybe less. You ran." Fury robbed her of words. "You analyzed me like I was data. Like I was a problem to solve. You were. His eyes held hers, intense and unapologetic. You were the most fascinating problem I'd ever encountered. Brilliant mind wasted on survival. Extraordinary woman made invisible by circumstance. I couldn't look away. That's not love. That's obsession. I never said it was love. Hajun's voice dropped to something raw, honest. I said it was obsession. Obsession that's kept me awake for 3 years. Obsession that made me restructure my entire household staff just to create a position you might apply for. Obsession that drove me to watch hours of surveillance footage just to see you smile at something on your laptop screen. Megan stared at him, her anger warring with something far more dangerous. Because there was something in his voice, something desperate and human, that made her question everything. You had no right. I had every right. He closed the distance, and she felt the door at her back. Because every moment I watched you, every detail I learned, every choice I made to bring you here was about seeing you, really seeing you. Not the invisible maid, not the struggling daughter, but the woman who deserves everything she's been denied. You can't give me what I deserve. You can only control what you take. Then let me give you truth. His hand rose to the door beside her head, caging her without touching. I'm a monster, Megan. I've killed 17 men. I've destroyed lives for profit. I've built an empire on violence and fear. But every terrible thing I've done, every sin I've committed, led me to that coding forum 3 years ago where I found someone who finally made me feel something besides the constant cold. That's not my responsibility. No. His other hand settled on the door, boxing her in completely. But it's my reality. You walked into my world thinking you were invisible, but I've been seeing you since the moment I found your first line of code. And now you know what it means to be mine. I'm not yours. Aren't you? His face hovered inches from hers. I own your debt. I control your access to your mother. I hold your life in my hands. But more than that, I know you, Megan. I know you bite your bottom lip when you're thinking. I know you hum when you're close to solving a problem. I know you dream about chocolate cake and fresh starts and a life where someone finally sees how extraordinary you are. Her breath caught. Every word landed like a physical touch, stripping away defenses she'd built over years of invisibility. But this time, she didn't let the words paralyze her. You know what you've observed, she said, her voice shaking but firm. You know patterns, behaviors, surface things. But you don't know me, Hajun. You don't know what I think about at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. You don't know why I really dropped out of MIT. It wasn't just money. You don't know what I'm afraid of, what I dream about, what makes me feel alive. His expression flickered. Surprise, maybe? You've been watching me like I'm a puzzle to solve, she continued. But I'm not a puzzle. I'm a person. And you can't know someone by studying them. You can only know them by letting them choose to be known. Then let me know you. His voice went quiet. Not through observation, through truth. Let me ask instead of assume. Let me learn you instead of catalog you. Why should I? Because I'm asking. He stepped back slightly, giving her space for the first time. I'm not demanding. I'm not threatening. I'm asking if you'll give me a chance to see you the way you deserve to be seen. As someone with autonomy who chooses what to share. Megan studied his face, searching for manipulation. But all she saw was something raw and honest that she didn't expect. He was scared. This man who commanded empires and killed without hesitation was scared of her answer. The realization shifted something in her chest. I hate you, she whispered. I know. You stalked me, manipulated me, orchestrated my entire life. Yes. He didn't deny any of it. But you also saw me when no one else did. The admission cost her, but she forced it out. You saw my potential, my brilliance, the person I could be if I wasn't drowning. Yes. That doesn't make what you did right. No. His eyes held hers. But does it make you want to walk away? That was the question, wasn't it? She should leave. Should take her mother and disappear. Start over somewhere he couldn't find her. Return to invisible, because at least invisible was safe. But safe had been killing her slowly. Hajun had shown her a different path. A terrifying, intoxicating path where she mattered. Where her mind was valued. Where invisibility was no longer an option. And she couldn't unsee it now. I don't forgive you, she said finally. I don't expect you to. And I won't be your possession, your experiment, your project. Then be my equal. He held out his hand, palm up, offering. Work with me, not for me. Build something together instead of being built around. Megan stared at his hand, at the choice he was offering. Real choice, for maybe the first time since she'd entered his world. She could walk away, or she could step forward. If I do this, she said slowly, I need something from you. Name it. No more secrets. No more surveillance I don't know about. No more making decisions for me because you think you know what's best. Her voice strengthened. You want to know me? Then treat me like an equal who deserves the truth. All of it. Hajun's smile was slight but genuine. Agreed. And my mother's debt? It's forgiven. Completely. Not held over me. Not used as leverage. She's free and so am I. Done. He reached into his desk and pulled out a thumb drive. Original documents, unsigned and unenforceable. Delete them yourself. Your mother is free. You're free. Stay or go. That's entirely your choice. Megan took the drive with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of actual freedom for the first time in years. Why? She asked. Why give this up now? Because owning you was never the point. Hajun's eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Seeing you become who you're meant to be. That's the point. And you can't become that while being owned. She clutched the drive in her palm, feeling tears threaten. This monster who'd manipulated her into his world was giving her the key to leave it. And somehow, that made her want to stay. I'm still angry, she managed. Good. Anger is honest. And I still don't trust you. You shouldn't. Not yet. Make me earn it. Megan met his eyes across the space between them and saw something she hadn't expected. Hope. He was hoping she'd stay. Hoping she'd choose this. Choose him. Not because he forced her, but because she wanted to. 18 hours left, she said quietly. I'll finish the code. Not because you threatened my mother. Not because you trapped me here. But because people will die if I don't. I know. And when it's done? She finally looked over her shoulder. I'm choosing for myself. Not you. Not my mother. Not my father. Me. Hajun's expression softened into something that almost looked like pride. That's all I ever wanted, clever girl. For you to finally choose yourself. She left him standing in his office, surrounded by the empire he'd built on darkness, and returned to her workstation. But this time, she carried his truth with her. And her own. The code waited. 18 hours remained. And somewhere in the tangle of her anger and fascination and unwanted desire, Megan realized that Hajun had been right about one thing. She wasn't trapped by his threats or his power. She was trapped by wanting to see who she could become if she stopped hiding. The virus's final layer beckoned, and she dove in with renewed focus. Not for him, not even for the innocent people whose lives depended on her success, but for herself, for the woman she'd been too afraid to let the world see. And when Hajun returned 3 hours later with coffee and silence, settling into the chair beside her to work, she didn't tell him to leave. She let him stay. Because maybe, just maybe, being seen by a monster wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Maybe it was the beginning of finally seeing herself. The code broke at hour 47. Megan's fingers stilled over the keyboard as the final encryption layer peeled away like skin from bone. The virus's architecture sprawled across her screens in complete detail. Activation sequences, target protocols, kill switches hidden in nested subroutines. She'd done it. But instead of relief, she felt hollow. Because breaking the code meant facing what came next. Behind her, Hajun rose from his chair. She felt him approach, felt the air shift with his presence, but she couldn't look away from the screens. You found it, he said quietly. Yes. Her voice came out distant. The activation key is biometric. Kevin's thumbprint and retinal scan, both required simultaneously. Without both, the virus stays dormant. Can you neutralize it? I can do better than that. She pulled up a secondary window, her exhausted mind still racing ahead. I can reverse engineer the delivery system, track where the virus originated, find Kevin, find. She swallowed hard. Find my father. Hajun's hand settled on the back of her chair, warm and grounding. That's not what I asked you to do. I know. She finally turned to face him. But neutralizing the virus doesn't stop Kevin. He'll just build another weapon, another threat. You'll never be free. And if we find him? Then you end this. Permanently. She stood, her body aching from hours of sitting, but her mind crystalline clear. I can trace my father's digital signature through the code. Every keystroke has his fingerprints. I can find where he's working, where Kevin is keeping him. Something dark and approving flickered across Ha-Jun's face, but it was tempered with concern. You're talking about war, Megan. About walking into Kevin's stronghold, knowing your father will be there. I know what I'm talking about. Do you? He moved closer, his eyes searching hers. Because once you see him, once you face Marcus Anthony after 12 years, there's no going back. You'll have to choose. Save him or condemn him. Forgive him or... He didn't finish the sentence. Or what? Her voice came out harder than she intended. Or watch him face consequences he can't run from. The weight of that choice settled over her like a shroud. For 12 years, she'd imagined finding her father. Imagined the reunion, tears, explanations, maybe forgiveness. She'd imagined him having a good reason for leaving. Something that would make the abandonment hurt less. But now, knowing he'd built weapons for Kevin, knowing he'd chosen comfort over conscience, knowing he'd left breadcrumbs in the code for her to find but never reached out himself, the fantasy shattered. I need to see him, she said finally. Not for closure, not for forgiveness, but because. She struggled to find the words. Because I need to understand if the man who taught me to code still exists. Or if that person died 12 years ago and I've been mourning a ghost. Ha-Jun's expression softened with something that looked like understanding. Then we go together. But Megan, I need you to be prepared for what we might find. Your father isn't the man you remember. Kevin has broken him in ways that don't show on the surface. How do you know? Because breaking people is what Kevin does best. His voice went cold. He doesn't use force. He uses comfort, absolution. He gives people permission to forget their sins by making them commit new ones. It's insidious and effective. Megan absorbed this, trying to imagine her father. Strong, principled Marcus Anthony, broken by comfort. It seemed impossible. But then, 12 years ago, it had seemed impossible that he would leave. Show me how to trace him, she said, returning to the keyboard. Teach me what I need to know about Kevin's operation. If we're doing this, I'm going in prepared. Ha-Jun's smile was slight, but genuine. Now you're thinking like a queen. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Megan mapped the digital trail her father had left. IP addresses routing through proxies, server farms in Virginia and Delaware, finally terminating at a location in South Philadelphia, an abandoned industrial complex near the refineries. Ha-Jun pulled up satellite imagery, structural blueprints he'd somehow acquired, security assessments from his intelligence team. Kevin operates from here. He pointed to the main warehouse. 3 floors. The top floor is his command center, where he meets with lieutenants, conducts business. The second floor is residential. Apartments for his inner circle. And the bottom floor? That's where he keeps his builders, the people who create his weapons, his infrastructure, his digital empire. Ha-Jun's finger moved to a specific section. Your father will be there, in a lab Kevin built specifically for him. Megan stared at the blueprint, at the space where her father spent his days building death. What kind of security? 12 men, maybe more. Biometric locks on all entry points, surveillance covering every approach. He pulled up another layer. But there's a service entrance on the east side. Old loading dock. The cameras have a blind spot if you approach from the rail line. You've been planning this. I've been planning for every contingency since Kevin sent his first threat. Ha-Jun met her eyes, including the one where you asked to come with me. You knew I would. I hoped you would. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. Because facing this alone, facing your father and my brother, it's more weight than one person should carry, even someone as strong as you. Megan looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers intertwined with hers like they'd always fit together. 2 weeks ago, his touch would have terrified her. Now it felt like an anchor. When do we leave? 2 hours. I need to brief my team, gather weapons, prepare extraction routes. He pulled her closer, his free hand cupping her face. But Megan, once we're inside that warehouse, follow my lead. Kevin is unpredictable, dangerous. If he realizes how much you mean to me, he'll use it. How much do I mean to you? Hajun's eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Everything. You mean everything. And that's the weakness Kevin will exploit if he sees it. The admission made her chest tight. This man who'd built empires on ruthlessness, who'd admitted to 17 kills, who'd manipulated her entire life, he was telling her she'd become his vulnerability. Then don't let him see it, she said quietly. I'm not sure I can hide it anymore. His thumb brushed across her cheek. Every time I look at you, I see the person I've been obsessed with for 3 years finally looking back, finally seeing me. It's written all over my face. Then we make that work for us. Megan's strategic mind kicked in, the same one that had been solving impossible problems for 47 hours. Kevin expects you to bring force. He expects violence. He doesn't expect you to bring me. His secret weapon, the daughter of his asset. We use that surprise. Hajun's expression shifted to something appreciative. What are you thinking? I walk in as your hostage, your leverage against Marcus. Kevin will believe you're using me to force my father's cooperation. It's exactly the kind of move he'd make. He'll underestimate me because I'm just Marcus Anthony's daughter, while you're actually your partner. She smiled, sharp and dangerous. I'll have access to my father, to the systems, to everything Kevin thinks is secure because he doesn't see me as a threat. And when the moment comes, I'll do what needs to be done. Which is, Megan thought about the code she'd broken, the systems she now understood, the digital architecture her father had built. I'll give Kevin exactly what he wants, and then I'll take it all away. Hajun pulled her into a kiss that was claiming and careful at once, tasting like coffee and promises. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. You terrify me, he whispered. In the best possible way. Good. She smiled against his lips. Now let's go get your brother. The call came at 2:47 a.m., earlier than planned. Megan had been trying to sleep, her body exhausted but her mind racing, when her secure line buzzed. Hajun's voice came through rough and strained. Change of plans. Kevin moved the timeline. We go now. What happened? He launched a test. 3 ventilators at a hospital in Camden went dark for 90 seconds. Gunfire cracked in the background. My men are already engaging his perimeter guards. We have maybe 20 minutes before he realizes this is a full assault. I'm ready. She was already moving, pulling on the black tactical clothes Hajun had provided earlier. Practical, flexible, nothing that would slow her down. Jay's coming for you. 2 minutes. The line went dead. Megan's hands shook as she laced her boots, but her mind stayed clear. This was it. No more planning, no more preparation, just action and consequences. Jay arrived exactly 2 minutes later, his face grim. Stay close. Move fast. Don't hesitate. The drive to South Philadelphia took 14 minutes through empty streets. Jay drove like demons chased them, weaving through industrial zones until the warehouse complex loomed ahead. A skeletal structure of rust and concrete, lit by sodium lights that cast everything in sickly orange. Bodies littered the approach. Kevin's men, neutralized with surgical efficiency. Inside, the warehouse reeked of gun oil and blood. Hajun's remaining men had secured the perimeter, but the center space held something that made Megan's breath catch. A server farm, dozens of towers humming with processing power, screens flickering with code she recognized instantly. Her father's architecture, rendered in steel and light. And there, in the middle of it all, Hajun stood over Kevin Park. Kevin was younger than she'd expected, handsome in a cold way that reminded her of marble statues, beautiful and lifeless. Blood soaked his shoulder, his face pale with shock and rage. But it was the man beside Kevin that made Megan freeze. Marcus Anthony, her father. Older now, his hair gray, his face lined with years of running, but unmistakably the man who'd taught her to code, who'd called her Meggie, who'd disappeared without explanation. Their eyes met across the warehouse floor. Megan. His voice cracked. Baby girl, what are you doing here? She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. 12 years of imagined reunions, and now that the moment was here, she felt nothing but static in her mind. Ha-Jun turned, his expression fierce and relieved. She's here because I need her. Because Kevin's last gift is about to kill thousands if we can't stop it. The virus is tied to my vitals, Kevin spat, his voice carrying dark satisfaction despite his wound. Heart rate drops below 40, respiratory failure, loss of consciousness. Any of it triggers immediate launch. So go ahead, brother. Kill me. But you'll be killing thousands of innocent people too. Not if Megan stops it first. Ha-Jun's eyes found hers. Can you do it? She moved forward on autopilot, her body operating on training and adrenaline, while her emotions stayed carefully locked away. She couldn't process her father's presence. Not yet. Not while people's lives hung in the balance. The nearest screen showed the code scrolling past. She studied it, her fingers already mapping the solution. It's possible, she said, voice steady despite the chaos. But I need time. The biometric monitoring is redundant. 6 different sensors, all feeding into the activation protocol. I have to disable each one without triggering failsafes. How long? 20 minutes, maybe 30. Kevin's heart rate is already dropping, Jay reported, checking a medical scanner. Blood loss. He's got maybe 45 minutes before his vitals crash. Marcus pushed forward. Megan, listen to me. Walk away. This isn't your fight. These men, this world. It's not you. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. You don't know who I am anymore. You're my daughter. I'm the daughter you abandoned. Her voice came out cold, factual. The one you left drowning in debt while you built weapons for psychopaths. Don't pretend you know me, Marcus. You gave up that right 12 years ago. I was protecting you. The NSA wanted me dead. I had to disappear. You had to choose. Now she did look at him, and the weight of 12 years of unanswered questions pressed into every word. And you chose to run instead of fight. You chose to hide instead of stay. Every day for 12 years you chose not to come back. Marcus's face crumpled. Megan, please. She's busy. Ha-Jun's voice cut through, protective and cold. And you lost your vote the day you wrote code designed to frame me for mass murder, Kevin said. Kevin lied. Ha-Jun's gun rose, aimed at Kevin's head. He promised you safety, gave you resources, made you complicit in atrocity. You stopped being her father the moment you chose comfort over conscience. But Megan was only half listening. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, building the decryption algorithm layer by layer. First sensor disabled. Second sensor required polymorphic decryption. Beside her, Marcus watched with something like awe. You got better. So much better than I ever was. I had to. She didn't slow her typing. Someone needed to clean up your mess. Medji. Don't call me that. The childhood nickname made her fingers stutter. That name belonged to a girl who thought her father was a hero. That girl died when you left. Silence fell except for the clicking of keys and the hum of servers. 15 minutes passed. 20. Kevin's vitals were dropping. Heart rate at 52 and falling. Then everything went to hell. 3 of Kevin's men, hidden in the warehouse rafters, opened fire. Chaos erupted. Ha-Jun's men returning fire, Jay shoving Megan behind a server tower, bullets ricocheting off concrete and steel. Through the madness, Megan kept typing. 4th sensor disabled. 5th required biometric override. She saw Ha-Jun move like violence made art, taking down 2 men with precision that should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something fierce and proud. This man who fought for his empire while she fought with her mind. Then Marcus lunged toward Kevin. Whether to protect or restrain him, Megan couldn't tell. Kevin pulled a hidden pistol. Time slowed. Megan saw the gun rise, saw it aim at Ha-Jun's unprotected back, saw Kevin's finger tighten on the trigger. Jay's backup weapon lay on the floor beside her, dropped during the initial chaos. Her hand moved before conscious thought. She grabbed the gun, raised it with shaking hands, and fired. The bullet took Kevin's guard in the shoulder. Not Kevin himself, but the man who'd been moving to execute Ha-Jun from behind. The guard dropped. Ha-Jun spun, saw her with the gun, saw what she'd done. Their eyes locked across the warehouse. Hers wide with shock, his burning with something between fury and worship. Marcus stared at his daughter, horrified. Megan, what have you become? She lowered the gun slowly, her hands trembling. Someone who doesn't let the people I care about die. She returned to the keyboard, forcing her shaking fingers to steady. The final sensor broke under her assault. The virus destabilized, its activation protocols crumbling into harmless fragments. "It's done," she called out. "The virus is neutralized. Kevin's vitals don't matter anymore." But she felt wrong saying it. Empty. Because she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd shot someone. She'd chosen violence. She'd become exactly what her father had feared. Hajun's expression shifted to something victorious and grim. He turned back to Kevin, who'd slumped against a support beam, his face pale with blood loss and defeat. "You lose, brother." Kevin's laugh was wet, painful. "Do I? Look at what you've done. You've turned an innocent woman into a killer, corrupted her, made her just like us. I'd call that a victory." "No." Hajun's voice rang with certainty. "I gave her the choice to be extraordinary. She made herself what she is. By shooting someone? By choosing violence?" Kevin's eyes found Megan's. "That's not extraordinary. That's just broken." Megan wanted to argue, wanted to defend her choice. But the gun in her hand felt heavy with truth she couldn't deny. She'd become someone her father didn't recognize. Someone she wasn't sure she recognized. Hajun raised his weapon, aimed at Kevin's head. "Wait." Marcus's voice cut through. "Please, just wait." He moved between Hajun and Kevin, his hands raised in surrender. And for the first time since Megan had entered the warehouse, she really looked at her father. He looked small, diminished, nothing like the giant of her childhood memories. "Megan," Marcus said, his voice shaking, "before this ends, before you watch him kill Kevin, I need you to understand something. There's nothing you can say that changes what you did. I know." He took a step toward her, and she noticed Hajun's subtle shift, positioning himself between them, protecting her even now. "But you should know why I left. Why I really left. You already said, the NSA. That was part of it." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "But the real reason? The project I was working on, the encryption I designed. It was used to target a terrorist cell in Yemen. Smart weapons, precision strikes, clean and efficient." He swallowed hard. "Except the intelligence was wrong. The building we hit wasn't terrorists, it was a school. 47 children died because of code I wrote. Because I was so proud of my brilliance that I never questioned what it would be used for." Megan's breath caught. "I couldn't live with it," Marcus continued. "Couldn't face you, your mother, myself. So I ran. And when Kevin found me, when he offered me a chance to forget, to become someone new, I took it. Because being Marcus Anthony meant remembering those children. Being Kevin's weapon meant I could pretend I was someone else. That doesn't make it better." "No," his voice broke. "But it makes it true. I didn't leave because I didn't love you, Meggie. I left because I couldn't love myself. And I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done." Megan stared at this man who'd shaped her childhood and abandoned her adolescence, and felt something crack inside her chest. Because she understood. God help her, she understood. She'd just shot someone to protect Hajun. She'd crossed the same line her father had crossed, made the same choice to use her skills for violence. And part of her wanted to run too. "You could have come back," she whispered. "After, when you'd processed it, you could have come home." "I know." Marcus's tears fell freely now. "But every year that passed made it harder. How do you explain 12 years of silence? How do you ask forgiveness for abandoning your child when she needed you most? So I stayed gone, and I hated myself more every day." "Good." The word came out harsher than she intended. "You should hate yourself. Because while you were hiding, Mom almost died. While you were building weapons for Kevin, I was scrubbing toilets to afford her ventilator. While you were forgetting, I was drowning. I know. And I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it." Megan stood, putting the gun down carefully on the server bank. "Sorry doesn't give me back 12 years. Sorry doesn't make you a father again." She walked toward him slowly, and Hajun moved with her, a silent shadow at her back. When she stood directly in front of Marcus, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something she'd been carrying since she'd found his signature in the code. A photograph, creased and faded. Her, at 7 years old, sitting on Marcus's lap while he taught her first program. both of them smiling at the camera, faces bright with joy and possibility. She'd kept it all these years, hidden in her wallet, a talisman against forgetting. Now she held it out to him. "This is the man I mourned," she said quietly. "The father I lost. But he's not you, is he? That man died in Yemen with those 47 children. You're just his ghost." Marcus took the photo with shaking hands, staring at it like it caused physical pain. "So here's what's going to happen," Megan continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. June is going to give you a new identity, money, a chance to start over somewhere none of us will ever find you. And you're going to take it. You're going to disappear again. But this time, you don't come back. Not for me, not for Mom, not for anyone. Megan, I'm done being your daughter." Her voice strengthened. "I'm done waiting for you to choose me. You had 12 years. You never did. So now I'm choosing me, and I choose him." She turned and stepped back toward Hajun, whose hand immediately found the small of her back, grounding her. Marcus looked between them, the mafia boss and the daughter he'd lost, and saw no path back. "Your mother would be ashamed," he whispered. "My mother is alive because of him." Megan's voice didn't waver. "That's all that matters." Jay appeared at Marcus's side, gripping his arm. "Let's go. Boss's mercy has an expiration." Marcus let himself be led away, looking back once with devastated eyes. Megan didn't watch him go. She was too busy staring at the photo she'd kept for 12 years, now clutched in her father's hands as he walked out of her life forever. Letting go hurt more than she'd expected, but it also felt like freedom. Hajun pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as the weight of what she'd done. Shot someone, banished her father, chosen this life. Crashed over her. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No." Her voice came out hollow. "I shot someone. I sent my father away forever. I crossed every line I swore I wouldn't cross. Yes. And I don't regret it." The admission felt like exposing a wound. "I should regret it. I should hate myself. But all I feel is relief that it's over." "That's not wrong." Hajun's voice was gentle. "That's survival. That's choosing to live instead of drown. My father called me broken." "Your father is wrong." He pulled back slightly, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're not broken, Megan. You're evolved. You saw the choice. Let the man you care about die, or pick up a weapon. And you chose life. That's not corruption. That's clarity," Kevin said. Kevin is a manipulator who needs everyone else to be as twisted as he is to feel better about himself. Hajun glanced back at his half-brother, still slumped against the support beam. "Don't let his words poison what you've become." Megan wanted to believe him. Wanted to think that shooting someone to save a life made her something other than a killer. But the weight of the gun she'd held wouldn't leave her hands. Hajun seemed to sense her spiral. He cupped her face, forcing her attention back to him. "Look at me. Tell me what you see. A monster who kills without hesitation." "Yes. And?" His eyes held hers, relentless. "What else?" "Someone who saw me when no one else did. Someone who challenged me. Someone who gave me purpose. And do you think I became this without cost? Without choices that haunt me? Without wondering if I'm irredeemable?" His thumb brushed her cheek. "I've made terrible choices, Megan. I live with blood on my hands every day. But I also live. I build. I protect the people who matter to me. That's what you did tonight. You protected what matters. At what cost? The cost of innocence." He said it gently but truthfully. But innocence isn't the same as goodness. You can be good without being innocent. You can choose mercy without being naive. You can acknowledge what you've done and still deserve better than drowning in shame. His words settled over her like absolution she wasn't sure she'd earned. "What do we do with Kevin?" she asked quietly. Hajun looked back at his half-brother, who watched their exchange with pale fury. "That's not my choice to make alone. Not anymore." "What do you mean?" "You saved my life. You broke his weapon. You made this victory possible." June's voice went formal, serious. "So the choice is yours, Megan. Do we kill him? Turn him over to authorities? Let him live in exile? This empire belongs to both of us now. Both of us decide its justice." The weight of that choice pressed down on her shoulders, Kevin had built the weapon that forced her into this world. Kevin had hired her father, creating the trap that destroyed any chance of reunion. Kevin had threatened thousands of innocent lives. By every measure, he deserved to die. But looking at him, broken, bleeding, defeated, Megan felt something unexpected. Pity. "He's your brother," she said quietly. "Half-brother. And he tried to destroy everything I've built." "I know." She looked at Kevin, at the cold beauty that masked emptiness inside. "But killing him doesn't change what he did. It doesn't bring back the innocence I lost. It just adds more weight to carry. So what do you suggest?" Megan thought about her father's exile, about the choice to live with consequences rather than escape them through death. "Let him live," she said finally. "But not in comfort, not in hiding. He lives knowing he failed, knowing you won, knowing that everything he tried to take from you is now under our protection." Hajun's expression shifted to something thoughtful. "You want him to watch his legacy crumble. I want him to understand that destruction doesn't equal power, that all his spectacle and violence accomplished nothing except his own defeat." She met Kevin's eyes across the warehouse. Death would be mercy. Life is justice. Kevin's laugh was bitter, pained. "You think exile is worse than death? You think watching from a distance is punishment? I think you'll spend every day knowing you were beaten by a maid and a monster." Megan's voice carried steel she didn't know she possessed. "I think you'll remember that moment when I held a gun and chose to save instead of destroy. And I think that will eat at you far more than a bullet ever could." Something flickered in Kevin's eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or grudging respect. Hajun turned to Jay. "Arrange transport. South America. Enough money to survive but not thrive. And make sure he understands. If he ever returns, if he ever threatens what's mine, there will be no mercy the second time." "Understood, boss." And V89, they left Kevin in Jay's custody and walked out of the warehouse together. Dawn was breaking over Philadelphia, painting the industrial wasteland in shades of gold and rose. Bodies had been cleared. Evidence was already being sanitized. Within hours, it would be like the battle had never happened. But Megan would carry it forever. The weight of the gun, the look in her father's eyes, the choice to exile rather than execute. Hajun's hand found hers as they approached the waiting car. "Are you okay?" "No." The honest answer came easier than pretense. "But I will be. That's all anyone can ask." They drove back to the penthouse in silence, both exhausted, both processing what they'd survived. When they arrived, dawn had fully broken. Light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making everything look clean and new despite the blood on their clothes. Hajun pulled her close in the middle of the empty living room, holding her like she might disappear. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For choosing to stay, for seeing this through, for becoming my equal when you could have stayed safe." His arms tightened. "For saving my life. You would have done the same." "Yes. But that doesn't make your choice less extraordinary." They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd walked into darkness and emerged, changed but intact. Finally, Megan pulled back enough to see his face. "I need a shower. And sleep. And time to process what I've become. Take all the time you need." Hajun brushed hair from her face. "I'll be here when you're ready." She believed him. For the first time since entering his world, she believed he'd keep his promises. She walked to her suite. Still luxurious, still beautiful, but no longer feeling like a cage, and stood under water so hot it bordered on pain, watching her father walk away, watching Kevin's exile, watching herself transform from invisible maid to something fierce and necessary. And through it all, Hajun had stood beside her, not controlling her choices, not making decisions for her, just present, supportive, equal. When she emerged an hour later, clean and exhausted, she found him in his office, staring out at the city with whiskey in hand. "Can't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. "Too much adrenaline." He glanced back. "You?" "Same. Come here." She crossed to him, and he pulled her into his lap with gentle possession. They sat like that, watching Philadelphia wake up, both lost in their own thoughts. "I'm not the same person who walked into your study 2 days ago," Megan said quietly. "I know, and I'm not sure who I am now." "You're someone who survived. Ha-Jun's voice was quiet but certain. Someone who made impossible choices and lived with the consequences. Someone who's finally free to become whoever you want to be. Is that freedom? Or just a different kind of cage? That's up to you to decide. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But Megan, whatever you decide, wherever you go from here, you're not invisible anymore. You can't be. You've been seen. Really seen. And that changes everything. She leaned back against him, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. He was right. She couldn't go back to invisible. Couldn't return to safe and small and unseen. She'd tasted power, purpose, being essential instead of expendable. And God help her, she wanted more. I'm staying, she heard herself say. Ha-Jun went very still. You're sure? No. Honest to the end. But I'm choosing it anyway. Because going back feels like dying slowly, and staying feels like living dangerously. And I'd rather live. His arms tightened around her, and she felt his breath hitch with something that might have been relief or joy or fear. Then welcome home, clever girl, he whispered. Welcome home. They sat there as Philadelphia woke around them, two broken people who'd found something like wholeness in each other's damage. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was true. And for now, that was enough. She didn't know what tomorrow looked like. Only that she'd stopped being afraid of her own darkness. Whatever came next. War, love, both. She would meet it on her terms. 6 months later, Seoul shimmered beneath their windows like circuitry alive with power. Megan stood at floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, wrapped in black silk that cost more than her old car. Behind her, Ha-Jun's arms circled her waist, his lips tracing the curve of her neck. She'd stopped flinching at his touch months ago. Now she leaned into it, into him, into the life they'd built on darkness and mutual obsession. The Yakuza accepted our terms, he murmured against her skin, his Korean accent turning each word into silk. The East Coast is ours. What about the Russians? They'll fall in line or fall apart. His hand slid possessively over her hip. The strategy you designed, cutting their supply chains while offering legitimate alternatives. It's brilliant. They can't fight what they can't see. I learned from the best. She turned in his arms, and the diamond on her finger caught the city lights. Black diamond. Rare and flawless, like the one his mother had worn. They'd married a month ago in a private ceremony. No guests, no witnesses except Jay. Just vows spoken in blood and shadows and promises that felt more binding than any legal document. Mrs. Kim Megan, or Megan Anthony Kim when she wanted to maintain her own identity in business dealings. Both names carried weight now. She ran criminal operations from behind screens. She'd erased rivals, stolen data, laundered millions through shell companies that existed only in digital space. She'd become the ghost in the machine, the invisible hand moving Ha-Jun's empire into the future. And she'd never felt more alive. Her mother lived in luxury in Zurich now, believing her daughter worked in international consulting, close enough to truth. They video-called weekly, and Megan spun stories about clients and travel and a life that was normal enough to be believable. Her father had sent one email from Buenos Aires 3 months ago. I see you in the news, under different names, but I know it's you. I don't know if I should be proud or terrified. She'd deleted it without responding. She'd learned to bury guilt beneath precision. The only way to stay functional in Ha-Jun's world was to code her emotions the way she coded firewalls, contained, encrypted, unseen. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. The silence after war was the strangest kind of peace. Seoul's skyline shimmered through the glass, each light a reminder that survival came with its own ghosts. Ha-Jun's phone buzzed against the glass table. The shipment cleared customs. No complications. Good. Megan pulled him toward the bedroom, this space they'd made theirs. All dark silk and city views and evidence of lives lived in dangerous luxury. We celebrate later. Right now, I want you to remind me who I belong to. His eyes darkened with familiar hunger. Say it first. I'm yours. She kissed him, teeth and tongue and promise. Every dark, twisted, brilliant part of me. Forever. No. Ha-Jun lifted her, carrying her to their bed. The one where he'd worshipped and challenged her 1,000 times. Not just mine, precious girl. We belong to each other now. the way fire belongs to what it burns, equal only in the scars it leaves. He laid her down, stripped away the silk with reverent hands, and claimed her with the same intensity as that first night, but different now, deeper, built on months of learning each other's bodies, each other's triggers, each other's darkest wants. They moved together like code and encryption. Complex, layered, solving for variables that changed with every iteration. And when they finally collapsed into tangled limbs and satisfied exhaustion, Hajun traced patterns on her dark skin that glowed in the soul night. Regrets? He asked quietly. Megan thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. The broke student cleaning floors, drowning in debt, dreaming of normal. That woman was dead. In her place lived a queen of shadows, partner to a king of violence, and she wouldn't change a single thing. She thought about her father's horror, society's judgment, the line she'd crossed when she pulled that trigger. Then she looked at the man who'd seen her brilliance when the world saw a maid, who'd challenged her instead of coddling her, who'd given her power instead of just safety. Only that I didn't find you sooner. He kissed her forehead, tender in a way reserved only for her. We have forever now. Forever in hell? The best kind of forever. They fell asleep as soul glittered below. Two people who'd chosen darkness over light, obsession over sanity, and each other over everything else. The next morning, Megan woke to find Hajun already in his office, conducting business in rapid Korean. She showered, dressed in tailored black pants and a crimson blouse, and settled at her own command center. 3 curved screens displaying markets, communications, the digital pulse of their empire. A message waited in her secure inbox. Anonymous. Encrypted. She broke the encryption in 90 seconds. Child's play now. And read the contents. New player entering the East Coast market. Former NSA. Dangerous. Claims to have information about Ha-Joon Kim's wife. Attached. Surveillance photos. Her. Entering a server farm in Virginia last month during a business acquisition. Her. Meeting with their financial advisors in Manhattan. Her. At a charity gala on Ha-Joon's arm, looking every inch the legitimate businesswoman. But beneath those, older photos. Her in a maid's uniform. Her father's NSA personnel file. Kevin Park's autopsy report. Wait, autopsy? Her blood ran cold. For a long moment she just stared at the screen, pulse roaring in her ears. The room felt smaller, like the walls had been listening the whole time. Kevin was supposed to be alive. In exile. That had been the deal. She pulled up secure channels, traced back 3 months, and found it. Kevin Park, deceased. Apparent suicide in Buenos Aires. Single gunshot wound to the head. But the ballistics report told a different story. Professional hit. Made to look like suicide. Ha-Joon had killed him anyway. You're tense. What's wrong? She spun to find him in her doorway, coffee in hand, wearing that expression of casual concern that used to fool her. Kevin's dead. He didn't even blink. Yes, you told me he was alive, in exile. He was, for 3 months. Ha-Joon set down the coffee and moved closer. Then he contacted a journalist. Started talking about his brother's criminal empire and the innocent woman he'd corrupted. He was going to expose everything. Expose you. So you killed him. I protected what's mine. No apology. No softening. He violated the terms of his exile. He threatened you. I eliminated the threat. Megan stared at him, at this man who'd promised no more secrets, and felt something crack in her chest. The memory of his old promise. No more lies. Flashed through her mind, bitter as static. You lied to me. I protected you from a decision you didn't need to make. His voice stayed calm, rational. You chose mercy. I respected that choice for as long as it was viable. When it became a liability, I made the hard call. That wasn't your call to make. It was exactly my call to make. He moved closer and she backed up against her desk. You're brilliant with strategy, with code, with seeing 3 moves ahead. But Megan, you're not a killer. Not really. You shot that guard to save my life, but executing Kevin in cold blood? That's not who you are. So I did it for you. You don't get to decide who I am. She wanted to hit him, to make him feel the weight of what he'd stolen. Her choice, her agency. but rage cracked under the pressure of everything they'd already done together. I'm not deciding who you are. I'm protecting what you are. His hands settled on either side of her, caging her without touching. You're good, Megan. Despite everything. Despite this world. You still have a conscience that keeps you human. I won't let you lose that. Not for anything. That's not protection. That's control. He watched her for a long time, jaw tight, as if weighing whether to detonate something sacred. It's love. The word hung between them like a grenade. What? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Hajun's expression softened into something vulnerable, raw. It's love, Megan. Messy and fucked up and probably not what either of us expected. But I love you. I love you enough to carry the weight of Kevin's death so you don't have to. Love you enough to make the hard choices that let you keep believing in mercy. Love you enough to lie when the truth would break something precious. That's not love. That's obsession, manipulation, control? He smiled without humor. Yes, it's all of those things too, because I never learned how to love cleanly. But Megan, I learned how to love you. And that means protecting you from becoming like me. She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to rage about lies and broken promises and the fact that he'd killed Kevin behind her back. But part of her, the part that still woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, seeing that guard's face as she pulled the trigger, felt relieved. She hadn't had to kill Kevin. Hadn't had to carry that weight. Hajun had carried it for her. I hate that you're right, she whispered. I know. And I hate that I'm relieved Kevin's dead. That's human. That's normal. His hand rose, cupping her face. Being glad a threat is gone doesn't make you a monster. It makes you someone who values her own survival. But you killed him. For me, I'd kill 1,000 men for you. Simple, certain, terrifying. I'd burn the world if it meant keeping you safe. That's what love looks like in my world, Megan. It's not flowers and sonnets. It's blood and sacrifice and making sure the person you love never has to carry weight they can't bear. She looked up at him, at this man who'd orchestrated her entire life, who'd lied to protect her conscience, who loved her in the most fucked up way possible, and realized she loved him back. Not despite the darkness, but because he carried it so she didn't have to. Don't lie to me again, she said finally. I can't promise that. Honest to the end. If the truth would destroy you, I'll lie every time. But I promise this, I'll never make you complicit in violence you don't choose. That's yours to control, always. It wasn't the promise she wanted, but it was the promise he could keep. The message, she said, pulling herself back to business. Someone's threatening us. Former NSA, they have information about both of us. Hajun's expression shifted to something cold, calculated. Thomas Sterling. You know him? I've been monitoring NSA chatter since Kevin's death, he said. Your name came up twice, once attached to a security breach, once to a buried investigation. Your father's old partner, the one who's been hunting him for 12 years. He pulled up a file on her screen. Surveillance photos, background intel, communication intercepts. He found Kevin's body, started digging, connected you to me, connected your father's code to the virus. How much does he know? Everything. Hajun's voice went grim. And he's not interested in money or power. He wants justice. Wants to expose the whole operation. Wants to see both of us in prison. Megan's mind raced through options, strategies, contingencies. We can't kill him. He's NSA. His death would trigger investigations we can't contain. Agreed. And we can't run. Our empire is too visible now, too established. Also agreed. So what do we do? Hajun's smile was sharp, dangerous. We do what we do best. We make him see that exposing us destroys more than it saves. We make him choose between his justice and the greater good. How? By showing him exactly what we've built, and what falls apart if we fall. Thomas Sterling sat in the diner 3 blocks from their Seoul hotel, looking exactly like Megan remembered from her father's old photos. Older now, hair more gray than brown, but those same sharp eyes that had probably seen too much. She slid into the booth across from him, alone. Hajun was nearby. She could feel his presence like a ghost at her back. But this conversation needed to be hers. Mrs. Kim, Megan Anthony. Sterling's voice carried decades of disappointment. The woman who chose a monster over her conscience. Call me whatever makes you feel righteous. She signaled the waitress for coffee. You asked for this meeting, I'm here, talk. I know what you are, what you've become. He slid a folder across the table. Money laundering, digital theft, accessory to murder. You helped Ha-Joon Kim build an empire on blood and stolen lives. I helped him build an empire on strategy and innovation. She didn't open the folder. Everything we do has legitimate fronts, legal protections. We operate in gray areas, Sterling, not black ones. Kevin Park is dead, executed. Kevin Park killed himself. There's an autopsy report. Falsified. I had independent analysis done. He leaned forward. You chose mercy. Let him live. And your husband murdered him anyway. The word husband from his lips made it sound like an accusation. Kevin violated the terms of his exile, Megan said calmly. He threatened innocent people. He was dealt with. By assassination. By justice. Her eyes held his. You want to talk about justice, Sterling? Let's talk about the 47 children my father killed. The ones he's been running from for 12 years. Did you ever find out what happened to them? His jaw tightened. I did, she continued. I traced the operation. Found the intelligence that was verified by 3 separate sources. Except all 3 sources led back to one man, Senator Richardson Voss. He needed a terrorist incident to push his defense bill through Congress, so he manufactured one. Used my father's code to create a tragedy. That's not. It's all true, and it's all documented. She pulled out her own folder, complete with financial transfers, communication logs, and Voss's personal journals detailing the operation. My father built the weapon, but Voss aimed it at children. Sterling's face went pale as he scanned the documents. Where did you get this? I'm very good at finding ghosts in machines. Megan's voice stayed level. Voss has been operating for 20 years, using NSA assets to create crises he can solve. Your partner, the one who died in that car accident 5 years ago? Rebecca Chen? That wasn't an accident. That was Voss cleaning up a loose end who'd figured out his pattern. You're lying. I'm offering truth. Uncomfortable truth. She pushed the folder closer. Take it to your superiors. Expose Voss. Get actual justice for those 47 children and the dozens of others who died because one senator wanted power. In exchange for what? You leave us alone. Simple. Direct. You don't expose Ha-Joon's operations. You don't publish whatever expose you're writing. You let us continue building what we've built. Which is? Megan pulled out a tablet, opened a secure file. Look at this. Really look. He scrolled through pages of data. Financial reports, infrastructure projects, educational initiatives. What am I seeing? Our empire. She zoomed in on specific entries. Yes, we run operations that exist in legal gray areas, but look at what we fund with those profits. Hospitals in Manila, schools in Jakarta, tech training programs for underprivileged kids across Asia. We've pulled 3,000 families out of poverty in the last 6 months. Built infrastructure that governments ignored. Blood money. Money that saves lives. Her voice sharpened. You want to take us down? Fine. But understand what falls with us. Those hospitals close. Those schools shutter. Those families go back to desperation. Is that the justice you're after, Sterling? Trading our sins for their suffering? He stared at the screen, his expression conflicted. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to show you reality. Megan leaned back. You see the world in black and white, good guys and bad guys. But we operate in gray, Sterling. We do terrible things that enable us to do extraordinary things. And yeah, maybe that's fucked up. Maybe we're corrupt and broken and damned. But we're also the reason 3,000 kids have clean water and education. That doesn't erase the crimes. No, but it complicates the justice. She finished her coffee. So here's my offer. Take down Voss. He's the real monster. He's the one using intelligence assets to murder innocents for political gain. Take him down and we'll help. Full access to our intelligence networks, resources, protection for you and any witnesses. And Ha-Joon Kim walks free. Joon Kim continues building an empire that, yes, exists in moral gray areas, but also saves actual lives. You get to be the hero who takes down a corrupt senator. We get to keep operating. Everybody wins except the people who actually deserve to lose." Sterling was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he could find answers there. His jaw worked, torn between duty and disgust. "If even half of this is true," he muttered, "then justice isn't as clean as I wanted it to be." "You really believe you're doing good?" "I believe we're doing necessary." Megan's voice softened slightly. "Look, I'm not asking you to approve of us. I'm not asking you to think we're heroes. I'm asking you to recognize that the world isn't as simple as you need it to be. Sometimes the monsters are the only ones willing to do what needs doing. That's a dangerous philosophy." "It's a survivor's philosophy." She stood. "You have 48 hours to decide. Expose us and watch those programs collapse, or take down Voss and let us keep building. Choose wisely, Sterling. Lives depend on it." She walked out of the diner, feeling his eyes on her back. Hajun fell into step beside her 3 blocks later, his hand finding the small of her back. "How did it go?" "He's thinking. That's all we can ask for." "And if he chooses wrong?" Megan looked up at him, at this man who'd taught her that survival sometimes meant choosing the lesser evil. "Then we do what we always do. We adapt, we survive, we protect what's ours. Together? Always together." They walked through Seoul's streets, 2 people who'd built an empire on darkness and found something like light in each other's shadows. The next day, Sterling sent a message. "I'm going after Voss. But Megan, this doesn't make you innocent, it just makes you necessary. Don't ever forget the difference." She wouldn't, because she'd learned that innocence was overrated. That being necessary meant carrying weight that crushed softer people. That loving a monster meant becoming one yourself, just a little, in the ways that mattered. But she'd also learned that monsters could build beautiful things, could save lives while destroying others, could love with a fierceness that transcended morality. 3 weeks later, Senator Voss was arrested. Somewhere between guilt and glory, they'd stopped searching for redemption and started building something that made sin feel useful. The news broke internationally. Corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of intelligence assets. Sterling got his hero moment. Hajun and Megan got their continued operations. And somewhere in Buenos Aires, Marcus Anthony read the news and understood that his daughter had become someone he'd never imagined. Someone powerful enough to negotiate with the righteous. Someone dark enough to make those negotiations succeed. Someone who'd stopped apologizing for surviving. That night, Megan stood at their windows overlooking the Han River, Hajun's arms wrapped around her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of innocence, but the peace of acceptance. She'd crossed every line she'd sworn to protect. Become everything she'd feared. Chosen darkness over light, obsession over safety, power over purity. And she'd do it all again, without hesitation. Because the alternative, being invisible, powerless, drowning, that was the real death. This was living. Dangerously, darkly, deliberately. "What are you thinking?" Hajun murmured against her neck. For once there were no ghosts in the room. No codes. No blood between them. That I love you. Simple, true, terrifying. That I'd choose you 1,000 times over. That I'm finally exactly who I was meant to be. And who's that? Your equal, your partner, your queen. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. The woman who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. His smile was slow, devastating, genuine. "Then let's rule our kingdom, clever girl. Together." "Together," she agreed, and meant it with every dark, twisted, brilliant part of her soul. Because some love stories were written in flowers and sonnets, but theirs was written in code and blood and unbreakable devotion. And it was perfect. Outside, the city glowed amber against glass and steel, the same color as the night they met, but now it reflected her crown instead of his shadow. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if you felt the danger, the desire, the impossible choice between light and shadow, don't just scroll. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what moment grabbed you hardest. And subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Stories where love isn't soft, it's survival. Where women don't need saving, they need seeing. Where darkness isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something extraordinary. Because sometimes, the monsters aren't the villains. Sometimes, they're the only ones brave enough to see who we really are. Until next time, stay dangerous.